The Zelnar prided themselves on their flawless logic and careful calculations. For over 1,000 cycles, they had expanded across the stars, never once taking an unnecessary risk. Their technology surpassed most species, their diplomacy ensured stability, and their strict adherence to probability ensured survival. But nothing in their vast databanks prepared them for humanity. 4 decades, they observed from a distance, perplexed. Humans had no respect for logic. They leaped into the void with reckless abandon, defied impossible odds, and, against all statistical reasoning, survived. Their behavior was erratic, their solutions unpredictable, and worst of all, they seemed to thrive in chaos. Now, the Zelnar faced catastrophe. A rogue asteroid, large enough to trigger an extinction-level event, was on a direct collision course with one of their most populated colonies. Their scientists analyzed every possible solution. The calculations were unforgiving, there was no way to evacuate in time. No weapon in their arsenal could deflect an object of this magnitude without shattering it into equally devastating fragments. The colony was doomed. They had accepted this fate. Loss was unfortunate, but survival of the greater species demanded rational decision-making. Then, against all protocol, a lower-ranking diplomat proposed something unthinkable. What if, she hesitated, we asked a human for help? Silence. The Zelnar High Council exchanged glances. It was an absurd idea. Humans were reckless, impulsive, and most importantly, unreliable. No rational species entrusted survival to chance. But as the asteroid drew closer, even the most rigid minds saw no alternative. A transmission was sent to the nearest human with any experience in high-risk operations. Captain Jack Reynolds. The human's record was troubling. Former military, dishonorably discharged for excessive improvisation. Current occupation, independent salvager, notorious for reckless problem-solving and an alarming disregard for personal safety. Jack listened to their situation, taking a slow sip from a battered metal flask. The Zelnar expected him to demand compensation, or perhaps reject their plea altogether. Instead, he grinned. Well, he said, rolling his shoulders, hold my beer. The Zelnar expected a sophisticated strategy, detailed calculations, and precise execution. What they got instead was Jack Reynolds pacing back and forth, muttering, all right, so what if we just move it? Their finest minds had already determined that the asteroid was too massive to destroy without catastrophic fallout. Jack, however, seemed unconcerned. He started gathering materials, thrusters, explosives, even an old mining ship held together by what looked like pure optimism. The Zelnar scientists analyzed his plan and came to a horrifying conclusion. There is a 0.000001% chance of success, one of them stated. Jack grinned. So you're saying it's possible? The Zelnar watched in horror as more humans arrived, mechanics, engineers, and smugglers, all treating the impending apocalypse like a weekend project. They laughed, argued, and swapped stories about past disasters they had somehow survived. The plan was simple. A series of controlled explosions would alter the asteroid's trajectory just enough to miss the colony. Jack compared it to a really aggressive game of pool. The Zelnar compared it to suicide. The countdown began. Jack and his crew positioned their equipment, attaching thrusters to the asteroid's surface while planting charges at key impact points. The moment arrived. The detonations fired. The asteroid shifted. For exactly 3 seconds, everything seemed to work. Then the asteroid spun violently off course straight toward the Zelnar homeworld. Panic erupted. Every simulation confirmed that their capital planet would be reduced to dust. The High Council accused Jack of sabotage, but he waved them off. All right, he muttered, cracking his knuckles. Plan B. The Zelnar were in chaos. Their homeworld was now in the asteroid's direct path, and every logical solution pointed to annihilation. Evacuation was impossible. Their defenses were useless. Their worst fears had been realized, entrusting a human with their survival had only made things worse. Jack, however, was already working the problem. He studied the asteroid's trajectory, tapped a few calculations into an ancient-looking device, and nodded to himself. All right. New plan. Before anyone could object, he sprinted toward a battered old freighter, the kind of ship long past its prime, held together by scrap and sheer willpower. He barked orders to his crew, who sprang into action without hesitation. None of them asked if this was safe. None of them even seemed concerned. Jack's voice crackled through the comms. "We're gonna slingshot this rock around the moon, redirect it just enough to miss your planet, and dump it into that gas giant over there." The Zelnar ran the numbers. The plan was impossible. Even if the asteroid's velocity could be altered mid-flight, the required precision was beyond anything their best pilots could achieve. Jack didn't wait for approval. The freighter launched, engines roaring as it sped toward the incoming asteroid. His crew scrambled to recalibrate the thrusters, divert power, and execute maneuvers that had no place in rational flight. The Zelnar watched in stunned silence as the freighter skidded across the asteroid's surface, narrowly avoiding complete destruction with each insane course correction. Then, against all probability, the asteroid began to shift. The gravity slingshot worked. The asteroid veered away from the homeworld, accelerating toward the gas giant. The plan had worked. Barely. As the freighter limped back, scorched and barely intact, Jack stepped out, missing a boot, covered in soot, and grinning like he'd just won a bet. He looked at the nearest Zelnar and dusted himself off. "So," he said, "who's buying the next round?" The Zelnar High Council stood in stunned silence. The asteroid was gone, safely consumed by the gas giant. Their homeworld and colony still existed. Against all probability, a human had solved an unsolvable problem. They replayed the events over and over, trying to make sense of it. By all logic, Jack Reynolds should have failed. The human mind was unpredictable, their methods reckless, their refusal to accept statistical reality utterly baffling. And yet, he had succeeded. One of their scientists, still shaken, whispered, he was not lucky. He was adaptable. Another, hesitant but intrigued, added, perhaps that is why humans survive where others perish. Jack, meanwhile, was already celebrating. His crew had patched up the freighter just enough to reach the nearest spaceport, where drinks were flowing, and exaggerated retellings of the event had already begun. A Zelnar diplomat hesitated before approaching him. "Your methods defy all logic," she admitted. "And yet, they worked. I do not understand." Jack leaned back in his chair, sipping from a fresh drink. "Where's the fun in that? The Zelnar would never see humans the same way again." The phrase "hold my beer" was now classified as a Level 1 galactic threat warning. And somewhere, across the galaxy, another desperate species would soon hear those same words for the first time.